And welcome back. I'm Sam Sachs, filling in for Thom Hartmann here on the Thom Hartmann Program. And it's debate time. Joining me now is Brian Darling, a contributor at Conservative Review, a former staffer to the Senator Rand Paul. Senator Rand Paul, who says that the American Health Care Act is going to be pulled before the vote tomorrow. What do you think? You think Rand's right? You think there's the votes there?
I think it's going to be very hard to pass it in the House because the Freedom Caucus probably is critical mass. They only need 21 Republicans to vote against us to defeat the bill. And it looks like they're there. I mean,
so what happens then? What happens if this thing doesn't go anywhere tomorrow?
Well, the goal for many conservatives is to go back to the table and try and negotiate a better deal. So we'll see if they can get something better, but I don't know. We'll see what happens.
This is a dead bill walking, and yet I still don't know why Paul Ryan and Donald Trump keep pushing it as though they have a chance of this thing passing. It ain't going to pass.
No.
Something new, something completely different might pass down the road, but this thing ain't passing.
Well, I mean, for argument's sake, say it did pass somehow the House. It can't pass the Senate. There is not enough votes. Right now, you have 3 definite no's. You have Mike Lee, Rand Paul, Tom Cotton will not vote for this.
Well, you might get Joe Manchin.
Yeah, maybe, but you still, I mean, you have, moderates like Susan Collins and others who won't vote for it, probably won't vote for it either. So it's very hard to see any pathway to get this passed in the Senate as is.
All right, well, let's talk about what we brought you on to talk about, which is Mr. Gorsuch. Neil Gorsuch, Trump's nominee to the Supreme Court. He's in his 3rd day of confirmation hearings, 2nd day if you don't include the first one where he wasn't asked any questions and didn't really get to speak. Democrats have, in the last few days, put forward a new strategy for obstruction here that I think is a pretty good strategy. And that is that a president or an administration who is under this cloud of FBI investigation, a serious investigation, a counterintelligence investigation, and sure, it could pan out that nothing's wrong here, as we saw with the Hillary Clinton investigation last year. But we have an ongoing investigation in a counterintelligence investigation. Should a president who either himself or his associates are under such an investigation be allowed to make a lifetime appointment to the Supreme Court?
I know. I think that that's a valid strategy in the sense that they need an argument. I mean, right now, Gorsuch is doing pretty well in his hearings. I think he's handled... He's very slick. I mean,
a little too slick.
I agree. No, I hate this process. I mean, I worked for the Senate Judiciary Committee, and I used to be disgusted that these nominees would come in and they would never answer any questions. It's like an oral examination. How much do you know about precedent? How much do you know about constitutional law? They don't answer any questions. I mean, my old boss would say, hey, he would ask nominees, what is your favorite color? Just to see if they would answer that question. Because then it leads to the next question. Do you have a favorite baseball team? What's your favorite baseball team? And then third question is, do you have any feelings about the right to defend yourself with a gun or abortion?
As they would never forget that they're just answering these questions and then they'll let slip their judicial philosophy.
Some would not answer the question of what their favorite color is because they knew what was coming next. But I don't like it. I think in a perfect world, I would love to see the Senate block every nominee until, I don't care, Republican or Democrat, until they started answering questions, and then make these guys answer questions and then let the process move forward. I mean, that's a separation of powers issue because the Senate plays a very important role in this process. And more power to the Democrats. Fight it hard. Try and reassert the power of the Senate to play a role in the confirmation process because the president only gets to nominate, the Senate advises and consents, and then the president at the end of this process will actually appoint the nominee.
All right, but back to my question here. Are you concerned with Republicans in the Senate jamming through a nomination to the Supreme Court, a lifetime nomination from a president whose campaign is under a counterintelligence investigation by the FBI right now? That could conceivably bring down if the Democrats' most fever dream allegations are true, or if the allegations in that, Golden Showers memo or whatever are true, this would bring down the administration.
Right. But
so with this question still out there, should he be able to appoint someone who's going to have a prominent position in our government for the next 35 to 40 years?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, so you don't have a problem with that.
No,
but you had a problem with a president who's in the last year of his administration being able to make such an appointment for 30, 40 years on the Supreme Court.
Only because the Senate had the power to just not ever schedule the nominee. I mean, I think people misperceive that somehow the Senate is supposed to be a rubber stamp for the president. And here, you're saying the Senate shouldn't be a rubber stamp. I agree with that. But I think that there isn't any actual evidence that the White House has done anything specifically
Well, there's an investigation,
wrong.
though. We don't know the evidence. I mean, we haven't seen it. I've been skeptical of these claims from the get-go as well, but we do have an investigation that is going to come to a conclusion, and we'll be able to know about that. But I don't know. I would be concerned by that. I mean, what's the rush? We went through a year without Merrick Garland. Republicans weren't concerned that we had a 4-4 court there. What's wrong with waiting another 6 months until this investigation concludes so that we make sure that a possibly illegitimate president isn't the one who's making a lifetime appointment at the Supreme Court?
Make the argument more. I don't have a problem with it. He's the president. He's sitting president. He was elected. He was, everything's legitimate I believe, for him being president.
Yeah. So
he gets that nomination. And if the Democrats can use that to block it, I think the Democrats have a lot of tools that they can use to block this nominee. I was on MSNBC this weekend, and Senator Blumenthal was on before me saying that he's going to filibuster and use every power he has other than the filibuster to slow up the nominee. Well, what does that mean? They can shut down hearings. They can shut down the committee process and do what they did with other nominees, walkouts, 2-hour rule, which means you can only have the Senate meet for 2 hours after the Senate convenes. There are a lot of strategic things they can do.
Committees can't meet for 2 hours.
So they can slow walk this process for a while.
You tend to be of the libertarian bend of the Republican Party, hence you working for Senator Rand Paul. Gorsuch used to work in the Bush Justice Department in 2005. A pretty scandalous time in the Bush Justice Department when we had the fallout from warrantless spying, fallout from torture. And in part of his work in the Bush Justice Department, Gorsuch did things like defend the administration's warrantless wiretapping program. He tried to weaken legislative prohibitions against torture. He tried to ensure that CIA agents who committed torture wouldn't be held accountable. Is that the sort of judge, this sort of Bush neocon, a guy who at least worked in the neocon Bush Justice Department, is that the kind of guy you want in the Supreme Court?
I wouldn't have nominated him. I mean, I would probably vote for him if I was a senator, but, ultimately on balance, he's probably a pretty good judge. He'll probably be decent. I think I'm looking very hard at the Fourth Amendment issues. Like you say, I mean, the fact that he was involved in defending the warrantless wiretapping, the NSA spying program, that concerns me. I think a lot of things about this nomination concerns me, but ultimately, I think he's really the best Republicans could have asked for. I think a lot of people were worried that Trump would get in office and not nominate from the list that he had. But no, those issues do concern me. I worry about it. I think a guy like Rand Paul probably, gives him some heartburn over the nomination. You'll probably vote for him, but it's not a situation where he's overjoyed about a nominee like this.
Yeah, it seems pretty indefensible to me. I mean, this isn't like, we all sometimes throughout our life will have to take a job that we're not proud of or that we might have to compromise our morals about. But a job in the Bush Justice Department, if you can get a job in the Bush Justice Department, you can probably get a job in a lot of other places too that doesn't require you to defend things like illegal spying and torture. So,
I agree with you, and I believe that it would be very interesting for this to be a centerpiece of the hearings where this nominee would be forced to answer questions about it. I mean, again, ultimately, I would probably support him. I would have heartburn over his role in these controversies, but I would support him. But I do think it's a right of the senators to know, what did you write? What was your mindset when you were putting together these political, they're basically political memos that he wrote. He was working in the Justice Department, not as a judge. So he can make the defense, hey, someday this might come before me, because he'd be recused from doing anything that he was specifically involved in anyway. So he should be forced to talk about these things.
During yesterday's portion of the confirmation hearing, Senator Sheldon Whitehouse pressed Gorsuch on the millions in dark money being spent to support him. We saw similar dark money spent to defeat Merrick Garland, to make sure that Republicans never let Merrick Garland through. At one point, Gorsuch said that, if Congress was uncomfortable about all this dark money being spent like this, then they should pass a law that prevents this sort of thing from happening. Well, I'm shocked if Gorsuch doesn't know this, but Congress has passed laws like this, and they've been struck down now by the Supreme Court, saying that any attempts to limit spending in elections amounts to curbing free speech laws, which is unconstitutional. Are you comfortable with a system that Gorsuch seems to be comfortable with, or at least maybe he's not aware? I doubt that. I'm not. Yeah. I think he was just trying to kind of get around the. That was one of the times he kind of got beaten up in that hearing. Are you comfortable with all this dark money going in to support a Supreme Court candidate justice? And maybe he will have ties back to those people or have to give favors back to those people. Of course, he doesn't even know, or at least he claimed he doesn't even know who these people are who are spending money.
Maybe we've been agreeing too much, but now I can finally disagree with you strongly because good. I'm okay with the dark money. I'm okay with it. Yeah, money. Because ultimately this is a big PR campaign that's going to be fought out, and the senators are going to have to decide, and ultimately they're going to have to run for re-election. And this is something where we all kind of knew going into this process that this nominee would have a pretty easy run. Democrats can still filibuster. I expect Democrats to filibuster. The million-dollar question is, do they have enough votes to prevent Republicans from getting enough Democrats to get to 60? I think it might be pretty close, but I mean, we saw with Alito, he was filibustered, but unsuccessful.
We've got about a minute left. Why do you think rich people should have a louder voice in this debate about Supreme Court picks than poor people?
Because people are smart. I think that people hear this information. They can discern garbage from true information. I think.
Really? You think people can discern garbage from true information after the election we just went through?
Yeah, I mean, Hillary Clinton lost. I was very happy about that. She was an awful candidate.
Well, there are a lot of people who would argue and I'm not going to be one of these people, but there's a lot of people who argue she lost because of fake news.
She spent a lot more money than Donald Trump did on her campaign, and it didn't help her. So money doesn't always buy election, doesn't always win. Just ask Linda McMahon. Did she spend 66 or 67 million in 2 Senate campaigns? And she didn't win, although she did end up at the Small Business Administration. So maybe she got something for it.
It is certainly easy to find exceptions to the rule. But the rule, 95% of the time, the candidate with the most money wins. And these laws allow people, or these lack of laws, or the Supreme Court rulings allow people who are very rich to spend lots of money without accountability in our elections. That you seem to be okay with, though. Brian Darling, former staffer to Senator Rand Paul, contributor at Conservative Review. Longtime sparring partner of mine. Yes. Thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks a lot.
Appreciate it, Brian. And more of the show coming up after this.